The 17-year-old kid currently throwing a massive, ear-piercing temper tantrum in the absolute middle of my crowded downtown coffee roastery was aggressively demanding that I immediately fire my lead shift manager and hand the high-paying job directly over to him. He was violently stomping his pristine, $300 designer sneakers against my reclaimed hardwood floors like an overgrown, spoiled toddler. He was blissfully ignoring the incredibly awkward fact that the manager he was furiously pointing at was his own older brother, who had packed his bags and moved out exactly 1 year ago. The parents stood right behind this screaming teenager, nodding their heads in full, delusional agreement with his insane demands. They confidently thought they could just walk into my commercial establishment and completely control the older son they had thrown away like absolute garbage. They were entirely, devastatingly unaware that the quiet 19-year-old kid wiping down the espresso machine wasn't just my employee. He was my 50-50 business partner, and he was about to legally and financially shatter their entire reality. I am Marcus. I am the founder and primary owner of a rapidly expanding, multi-location coffee roasting company. In my 22 grueling years of managing retail employees, dealing with aggressive landlords, and surviving the brutal, razor-thin profit margins of the food and beverage industry, I have never seen a kid grind as hard or bleed as much as Leo, and I have certainly never witnessed a family so deeply, financially parasitic, and completely disconnected from the harsh reality of the real world. Leo walked into my original flagship cafe exactly 1 year ago. It was a freezing, miserable January morning. He was 18 years old, wearing a thin, cheap winter jacket that offered no protection from the wind, carrying a heavy backpack, and he politely asked me for a job. I was desperate for a reliable weekend closer, so I hired him on the spot for barely above minimum wage. I immediately noticed that Leo didn't live like a normal teenager. He lived like a man who was fighting a daily war for basic survival. He was enrolled in a heavy load of classes at the local community college. Every single day, whether it was pouring rain or actively snowing, he would walk 2 miles from his aunt's tiny, unheated spare bedroom to the campus, attend all his classes, and then walk another 3 miles directly to my coffee shop. He never spent a single dime on the city bus. He never bought food from the local restaurants. For the first 4 months I knew him, I watched this kid sit in my freezing back break room and eat cheap 50-cent packets of dry instant ramen noodles for lunch. When he was truly starving, he would quietly eat the stale, rock-hard cinnamon rolls that we were supposed to throw in the dumpster at closing time. He wore the exact same pair of worn-out black work shoes every single shift, literally holding the rubber soles together with silver duct tape. But what really caught my attention was his absolute, undeniable hustle. Leo wasn't just wiping down sticky tables and serving lattes. He was treating my coffee shop like it was his own life on the line. He didn't complain about the hard labor. He would show up at 4 a.m. in the freezing cold to help me manually carry 50-pound burlap sacks of raw coffee beans off the delivery trucks. His hands were constantly covered in burn scars from the boiling steam wands. He spent his breaks in the back office, aggressively fighting on the phone with our cheap, stubborn suppliers, refusing to hang up until they lowered our wholesale prices. By month 6, he was working 60-hour weeks and practically running the entire store single-handedly. I didn't just give him a minor raise. I am not an idiot, and I know how to recognize true grit. I called my lawyer, drafted the paperwork, and legally offered him a 15% equity stake in the company, officially making him my junior business partner. It was the night we signed the partnership papers that Leo finally sat down in the empty cafe, looked at his cold cup of black coffee, and told me exactly why he worked like he was running out of time. He told me the absolute, heartbreaking truth about the family that had discarded him. Leo had grown up as a completely ignored, heavily neglected shadow in his own home. His parents, specifically his deeply vain mother, were obsessed with keeping up appearances and coddling his younger brother, Austin. Austin was the classic, textbook golden child. He was incredibly lazy, highly demanding, and completely addicted to expensive video games. His parents constantly bent over backward to shield him from any minor inconvenience, treating him like royalty while treating Leo like a burden. The absolute, unforgivable breaking point happened exactly 1 year ago, on the night before Leo's 18th birthday. Leo hadn't asked his parents for a new car or a massive party or a single dollar of their money. He had worked grueling weekend shifts dragging boxes at a local grocery store for an entire year, saving up exactly $200 of his own hard-earned cash. His only plan was to take his 3 best friends to a new burger joint downtown and maybe pay for a cheap movie ticket afterward. It was a completely harmless, self-funded milestone to celebrate becoming an adult. But during dinner the night before his birthday, his mother had coldly canceled his existence. She looked across the dinner table at Leo and bluntly announced that they were completely skipping his 18th birthday celebration. When Leo asked why, she simply pointed at 16-year-old Austin, who was lazily pushing peas around his plate. She claimed Austin was feeling a bit left out and was getting incredibly jealous of the minor attention Leo was receiving. She said it was better to completely ignore Leo's birthday just to keep things fair for the younger brother. The most sickening, infuriating part? Exactly 2 months prior, these exact same parents had thrown a massive, wildly expensive graduation party for Austin simply because he managed to pass the 10th grade. They literally rented a massive, commercial-grade inflatable bounce house and put it in their backyard for a 16-year-old boy, completely draining their checking account for a meaningless fake milestone. When his mother laughed in his face and told him not to be dramatic about missing a birthday, Leo didn't scream. He didn't argue. He didn't throw a fit. He just quietly walked upstairs, packed exactly 2 heavy duffel bags, grabbed his birth certificate and social security card from the desk drawer, and walked out the front door into the freezing night with exactly $800 to his name. His father didn't even bother to get up from his comfortable recliner to stop him. They threw their oldest son into the street over a burger dinner. Which brings us directly to today's catastrophic, highly public collision of past and present. Leo and I were standing behind the main espresso bar during the busy afternoon lunch rush. Leo had just bought his first car, a used but incredibly reliable, pristine Honda Accord that he paid for entirely in hard cash. He had parked it right out front, clearly visible through the massive glass windows of the shop. The front doors violently swung open, and the entire toxic family marched inside. His mother, his father, and Austin. They didn't look like the arrogant, perfect family anymore. They looked incredibly stressed. Their clothes looked slightly worn, and there was an aggressive, desperate edge to their posture. They had clearly tracked him down through his aunt or his old high school friends. Austin immediately pointed a shaking finger at the beautiful Honda parked outside, then aggressively pointed at Leo, his face twisting into an ugly, entitled sneer. This initiated the exact devastating foreign exchange sequence that would permanently end their family's relevance, their financial standing, and their completely manufactured reality. "I cannot believe you're being this incredibly selfish, Leo," his mother violently shrieked, executing the first exchange, completely ignoring the stunned customers as she marched directly up to the espresso counter. Austin turns 18 next week. He desperately needs a reliable vehicle to get to his classes, and we saw you driving that car outside. We are your family, and we are heavily struggling right now. You need to hand over the keys to that Honda immediately so your brother has a fair start in life. You owe us for raising you." Leo didn't flinch. He didn't drop his steaming pitcher of milk. He calmly wiped down the stainless steel counter with a damp rag, looking at the woman who had discarded him with absolute, terrifying clinical detachment. "I don't owe you a single dime, and Austin isn't getting my car," Leo countered, his voice a smooth, calculated baseline, executing the second exchange and instantly dropping the mid-twist. "You didn't cancel my 18th birthday because Austin was simply feeling a little jealous. I manage the accounting books for this entire company now, Mom. I know exactly what financial ruin looks like. You canceled my cheap burger dinner because Austin had secretly stolen your credit cards and racked up over $14,000 in non-refundable video game microtransactions. You were completely, entirely dead broke, and instead of punishing your golden child for massive credit card fraud, you threw me out of the house to hide your own absolute financial incompetence. The mother physically recoiled, staggering violently back against a high-top wooden table as the remaining color completely drained from her face. She stared at Leo in sheer, unadulterated terror. He wasn't supposed to know that. He was supposed to be a naive, struggling teenager, not a hardened businessman who could instantly read a collapsing family balance sheet. "You are a terrible, toxic brother," Austin suddenly screamed, executing the third exchange, throwing his massive temper tantrum, and violently kicking the bottom of the wooden coffee counter like a spoiled child. "I deserve that car. I deserve this job. Mom and Dad are completely out of money. The bank has been calling the house every single day for 3 months. The sheriff came and taped a bright orange paper to our front door this morning. We are losing absolutely everything, and you're just standing there hoarding all your cash. You have to give us money right now to save the house." I watched Leo slowly untie his canvas work apron and place it gently on the back counter. He walked around the espresso machine, standing directly in front of his weeping parents and his screaming, pathetic younger brother. He didn't raise his voice to match their hysteria. He simply looked at them with the cold, unyielding apathy of a landlord looking at a terrible tenant. "I am not giving you a single dollar to save that house, because legally, that house doesn't belong to you anymore," Leo stated coldly, executing the final exchange and dropping the devastating ending twist that completely shattered their world. "You didn't just max out your credit cards for Austin's stupid video games. To pay for that ridiculous, massive bounce house party for his 10th grade graduation, you took out a massive, high-interest loan against a house you already couldn't afford. You officially stopped making your mortgage payments 90 days ago. I know this because I saw your exact home address on the local county foreclosure list last week. The bank is legally throwing you out onto the street this Friday morning, which is incredibly ironic because tomorrow afternoon I am officially bringing a cashier's check to close on a massive, fully renovated duplex on the north side of town, and I am paying the entire down payment in pure, verified cash." The pristine coffee shop immediately descended into absolute, suffocating silence. Even the heavy commercial coffee grinders seemed to completely stop making noise. The father's knees completely buckled. He dropped heavily into a nearby wooden chair, openly gasping for air as the sheer magnitude of his complete financial and paternal failure suddenly crushed his chest. The mother buried her face entirely in her trembling hands, letting out a pathetic, strangled sob. They hadn't just made a minor parenting mistake. They had completely destroyed their own financial existence to coddle a lazy, entitled teenager. They had thrown away the incredibly brilliant, disciplined son who could have easily saved them, only to realize he had utilized the exact same trauma they caused to build an impenetrable financial fortress that completely excluded them. Leo stood completely still, calmly adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, looking down at the broken, predatory people who used to be his parents. He didn't gloat, and he didn't demand an apology for the birthday they stole from him. He simply reached over the counter, grabbed his Honda car keys, and prepared to go to the bank to finalize his massive real estate transaction. He paused, looking directly at his weeping mother and the stunned, completely silent younger brother. "You're all legally adults now," Leo stated, his voice completely dead, delivering the first brutal boomerang line. "Birthdays aren't really that important anymore." His mother looked up, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking violently as she realized they were going to be sleeping in a cheap motel by the end of the week. "Please, Leo," she begged, her voice cracking with sheer desperation. "They're taking our entire home. You can't just leave us on the street." Leo didn't even break his stride as he walked toward the heavy glass front doors of the cafe. He pushed the door open, letting the freezing city breeze sweep into the warm shop, and looked back over his shoulder one final time. "Don't be dramatic, Mom," Leo said smoothly, delivering the final, echoing boomerang line that permanently ended their relationship. "It's just one house.